Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicast and in partnership with Vertical Valor magazine. In this two-part series, Jack Schonely and I talk with the members of the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department's Henry 1, including unit supervisors Chris Haas, pilot Nigel Cooper, and TFO Lawrence Matelli. This is a unique project done in conjunction with Vertical Valor magazine, the Real ResQ Podcast, and the Hangar Z Podcast. The article written by Vertical Valor magazine is available now at verticalmag.com. The episode provides an insightful look into the world of the multi-mission airborne law enforcement unit. We get an opportunity to discuss Henry 1's history, mission profiles, crew dynamics, aircraft performance, and the importance of training documentation. They emphasize the significance of smooth operations, the evolution of their training programs, and the critical nature of competency and currency in high-stakes environments. We talk about the importance of collaborative efforts between law enforcement agencies, focusing on the operational dynamics of the Sonoma County Sheriff's Aviation Unit. This conversation delves into the experiences and insights of the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department's Henry 1, focusing on their teamwork and personal stories from significant events like the Tubbs fire, where they share their personal experiences, emphasizing the dedication of law enforcement officers in the face of disaster. Thank you to our sponsors, Dallas Avionics, Night Flight Concepts, and Bell.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Schonely.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Schonely. Hangar Z is brought to you by MHM Publishing, Vertical Helicasts, and we've been really looking forward to this episode. John Gray is with me today, and John is the creator of the Hangar Z Podcast. John, good day.
Commander, good day.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
This is going to be good. We've talked about this for a while, haven't we?
Absolutely. Yeah, this has been one of those projects that we anticipate for quite a long time. In fact, I remember there were some planning meetings that I was a part of, talking to Chris and Quinny, as we'll get into. Yep. As I'm driving down the 395, really spotty cell service, but as we're talking about this project, man, I'm like, holy cow, this is going to be really cool. So glad to get to this point.
Well, what John's talking about is the Sonoma project, and it sounds really cool, and it is. And so you can guess that we're going to be dealing with Sonoma County today and talking to them, but it's in conjunction with a whole bunch of stuff. It's not just the Hangar Z, Real ResQ Podcast, which is part of Vertical Helicast with Jason Quinny. Quinny's been there already, done a bunch of stuff with Sonoma County, and we're working on more content that's going to be related to that. Joe Bradshaw, vertical photographer, was with Quinny. There's going to be video, print, and a couple of podcasts, and they come out in February. So all together. So you're going to be able to listen and watch and learn from multiple sources, media sources, through MHM Publishing about the Sonoma project. So with that, let me just say that this is also unique in that we just didn't grab one person from Sonoma County Sheriff's Office. We've got 3, and this will be great. It's really an honor because Sonoma County and their unit is called Henry 1. I mean, everybody knows them as Henry 1, and we'll get to that in a minute here. But we've got the sergeant of the unit, Chris Haas. Chris, welcome to the Hangar Z.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
We've got TFO Larry Matelli. Larry, welcome. And pilot Nigel Cooper. Welcome, Nigel.
Good to be here.
It's good to have you guys. This is really nice because we'll have 3 different perspectives. Now, Chris is the sergeant of the unit, but he was also a TFO there. So that's important. You'll hear that in his background. But we've got 3 experienced Henry 1 aircrew people, and we'll get multiple perspectives on the topics we're going to discuss. So with that, let's jump into it. Each of these gentlemen have very unique journeys in getting to the Henry 1 program at Sonoma County. Very unique. And they're very interesting. All three are different and unique and interesting. So let's start with Chris. Rank has its privilege, Chris. And you're the sergeant now. So Chris, get us started. Tell us about where you grew up, aviation influences, law enforcement influences, all that. How did you end up at Henry 1, starting with where you grew up?
So I grew up here in Santa Rosa. Really, as a kid, had zero desire to be a cop. Nothing against cops, but just wasn't anything I was interested in. I was always super interested in aviation. So when I turned 16, I drove to this airport, and I think I'd had my license for a matter of a month. And I figured, man, I could just drive to every, after school one day, I drove to every business here, like looking for a part-time job. Because I figured, well, I want to get a job. I've got a car, so I might as well go to the airport and see if somebody will hire me. And needless to say, no one hired me. They were, I went from one place to the next, and they're like, yeah, I don't, good for you, man. But yeah, pound salt, go to the next place, So I ended up at this flight school here. And I kind of got BSing with the owner, and I was kind of shocked that he actually was willing to even like talk airplanes with me. And so we kind of looked around some of the flight school airplanes. He ended up taking me over he had a hangar here, showed me some of his personal planes. And so we probably talked for like 2 or 3 hours. School was closed at that point. It's probably 7:00 in the evening. And he's like, I don't know, man, we really have no jobs for you. I know that's why you're here, but why don't you come back on Saturday and you can wash airplanes and I'll pay you to do that. So I showed up back up at the airport that weekend. I washed some airplanes, and then one thing led to the next. And over the next, it's honestly the only job I've had other than being a cop. I worked there for 5 years until I was hired at 21 here. And I ended up running like the desk during the weekend. So it was actually a pretty sweet job being at the airport, and honestly just doing what I'm doing now, just hanging out, watching airplanes. The cool part of that, and what led to ultimately me going into law enforcement, is I would watch the sheriff's that where our school was located was in, you could look across the field and see the sheriff's hangar, the helicopter, and, it had a bit of notoriety. So I knew what they did. Being interested in aviation, obviously I could see that was a pretty interesting, cool thing to do. We had, a few years into working at the flight school, we had a deputy sheriff that also worked on the helicopter as an alternate at the time. So, part-time on patrol, part-time on the helicopter. He was taking flight lessons from us. And so super nice guy. And he said to me, he's like, hey, if you ever want to go on a ride along, not on the helicopter, that would have blown my mind. But it's like, man, if you ever want to go on a ride along, like on a Friday night, let me know. I'd be happy to take you. So I figured that would be cool to do. And so I went on a ride along with him, and I was like, holy, that's, I don't know. It opened my eyes to I could totally see myself, law enforcement definitely seems like something I would be interested in. Like the way he was talking with people, the guys he worked with, the culture it seemed like they had here. I was just like, that's what I don't know what it was. It was just like this epiphany of that's what I want to do. But knowing that they've got this helicopter, it was like, I've got to make that happen. I've got to work for that department, and then I can totally do the aviation thing. And eventually that would be something I could work on that helicopter. So I ended up getting hired as a deputy at 21, and then, just worked my way through patrol, FTO, eventually got on the unit, and here I am now. So it's been quite the experience.
And when you initially came to the unit, you came in as a tactical flight officer, correct?
I did. In 2016, I got brought on as a TFO. Did that for about 6 years, got promoted, and then was actually able to promote in place. And so I just became the supervisor of the unit.
That's fantastic that you got to stay, with all that experience. That means a lot. Yeah.
I think our department, it's kind of, I'm nobody special, trust me, but I think this new administration kind of realizes that, there are certain units within our agency that need expertise. And so it doesn't work well, in my opinion, in an aviation unit. If you don't have somebody that has done the job, it's very hard to lead that unit. So I appreciate that they had enough confidence in me to put me right into this spot. And I hope I'm not disappointing them too bad. So
that's something that we talk about a lot.
Yes, you read my mind, John. I mean, that topic comes up regularly, doesn't it?
Yeah. There's not many agencies that have the benefit that you guys do as far as having somebody in that supervisor position that understands the job and has done the job. How did you guys get in a position where that's a possibility?
I don't want to say trial and error because we've had good supervisors up here. I'm certainly not putting anyone down. I think at the end of the day, though, that to make this unit run seamlessly, they knew they needed to put somebody in there that just knows the day-to-day and knows how to be a flight officer. So, and the other half of it is we're not a big unit, so I still fly on a regular basis. So, but the flip side is I think we got here, I think a lot, and I hate to say it, but like, and I'm sure we'll touch on it later, this unit has had, unfortunately over the years, there has been funding issues. And so with those issues, I think we're at a point now, I shouldn't say I think, I know we're at a point now where the funding has been shored up. The county has agreed to like an indefinite funding of Henry 1. And so I think that looking long-term, I think they just want stability here. So like we have financial stability now. Well, now personnel, they want personnel stability.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think we're at a really good place right now. Yeah.
And we will talk more about that because every unit has ups and downs, but yours has had their share. And,
for sure.
And I meant to say this in the beginning that what we're talking about here is a one aircraft unit, and for the YouTube watchers, you're looking at it. It's sitting right behind all three of our guests. It's sitting right there, a Bell 407, right behind them. But it's a small unit that makes a big, big difference, and that's important. That's important. Some of the best stories and some of the best examples of what law enforcement aviation is all about come from units just like Henry 1. And as our listeners and viewers are going to see here in the next couple hours, this unit does a lot of different things with that one aircraft sitting there. Great. Well, let's switch to Larry. Larry, tell us about where you grew up and your journey that got you to Sonoma County Sheriff's Department and then to Henry 1.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up about 5 minutes that way. So live right down the road from the airport. Growing up, so I grew up here in Santa Rosa. So growing up in this area, kind of everybody knows Henry 1. It's very notorious. As a kid, my dad would actually bring us, our hangar is located at the end of Becker Boulevard. And so there's a big turnaround, and my dad would drive us out here and park, and we'd watch the airplanes and helicopters, watch Henry 1 take off. So, growing up, I always knew about Henry 1. Always had a desire to go into law enforcement, but I really wanted to fly F-18s in the military. So in high school, I decided, hey, I'm going to go talk to a recruiter, talk to the Marine Corps recruiter, and they basically told me, well, you have poor eyesight, so you can't fly fighter jets. So being the 17-year-old and not being very bright, I talked to the Army. They said they would actually they'd pay for the laser eye surgery so I could fly helicopters.
Oh, wow.
Well, I told them absolutely not. I don't want to fly helicopters. I want to fly fighter jets. So it's kind of funny, full circle. Now I'm here working on a helicopter and I absolutely love it. So I wish I would have gone that route, but that's okay. So, after high school, I ended up, my family and I were big into motocross. So continued racing motocross and stuff, realized there's no way I'm going to make a living out of that. Well, actually, let's back up a little bit. So I was about 17 years old. My buddy and I, kind of a funny story too, that comes full circle to Henry 1 here. My buddy and I are driving down a road here in the county, and it's nighttime. All of a sudden, some light hits our car, and we're kind of like, what is going on with that? So we keep driving. Light hits us again. We start looking around, look out the window, and it turns out it's a spotlight from a helicopter. So we realize that the helicopter is circling us with its spotlight on us. So we just pull over on the side of the road. Next thing we know, there's like 15 cops, Santa Rosa and sheriff's deputies, Santa Rosa police and Sonoma County deputies. And we get pulled out on a high-risk stop. So it turns out we just happened to be driving away from the area of a stabbing. And so kind of a funny story. I've actually been stopped by Henry 1.
Wow.
So, as a kid.
Did you have to call your cousin Vinny to come and
yeah, you know,
was you or was it?
Yeah, it was pretty bad, but
Wow.
yeah. So kind of a funny story. It's every time I tell people about that, they're like, "No way." So, but yeah. So after high school, I ended up I was 20 years old. Went and checked out the police academy. They had an open house, got accepted, and then I ended up getting hired by the Marin County Sheriff's Office. So I did 5 years down there, 2007 to 2012. And then, I knew I always wanted to come home. So lateraled up here to Sonoma County. And, again, I'd always known about Henry 1 and held Henry 1 in a very high regard. So, I'd never been in a helicopter. And one of the guys I was working with at the time, he was a part-time TFO up here, an alternate. So he asked me, "Hey, would you be interested in working on Henry 1?" And I was like, "Well, sure, but I get motion sickness. I'm scared of heights, and I've never been in a helicopter, but let's try it." So I did a couple fly-alongs, and I was hooked.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So you had respect for Henry 1 despite the fact that they jacked you up in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, I think that was before they had the MX-10. So now I think, it might be a little bit better because the truck didn't match the description at all. So the truck we were in.
Oh my gosh, that's a great story. Unbelievable. Go backwards again. You said that even as a young kid, you had law enforcement on your radar.
Yeah.
In addition to the FA-18 dream, you had law enforcement on your radar. What was the cause of that? If you know, I mean, was it something on television? Was it a relative? What was it?
I've always just been interested in the military, law enforcement, that team dynamic. Again, growing up, we raced dirt bikes, and so there's a little bit of an adrenaline junkie in me. Okay. And then, my grandfather was a San Francisco cop, and so he retired in, I think, in the early 80s. And so he obviously had some pretty wild stories about law enforcement.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a cop down in San Francisco. And so, yeah, it's always kind of been in my blood. And, my dad was a truck driver. He wasn't in law enforcement, but both myself and my brother, who works for our agency as well, he's one of our detectives. We both got into it. So
that's cool.
Wow. That's really cool. John, did you ever get a spotlight put on you growing up from a helicopter?
No, I did not, unfortunately. But it's interesting hearing Larry and Chris talk. I mean, both of you guys as kids saw this helicopter in operation and went to the airport, and now you're sitting in the hangar that you saw as kids.
I love that.
You talk about a full circle deal there. What is your takeaway, Chris? When you think about those early days as a young kid looking across the field or up the field and seeing the hangar with that aircraft, and now you're in there.
I'll be honest, and I don't want to sound cliche, but it's like you're living your dream. So, I'll drive down Airport Boulevard, and I mean, on a regular basis, I mean, I can tell you this week I thought of it. I'll drive down there and I'll just be like, in a song that I was into when I was 17 years old, 18 years old, will come on the radio because I listen to the same type of music. I guess I'm getting old now that I'm in my 40s, but it's like
that's okay. Smooth jazz.
Yeah,
little Kenny G.
Yeah, little Kenny G. Which I did see him in concert a few years ago because I knew you were going to bring that up. I did see Kenny G in concert a few years ago, and it was awesome. So, no, but needless to say, it's like I'll be driving down, airport, and it's like I can't believe I'm actually doing this. Like, it's I'm just very, very fortunate. I just can't say enough of where it's like I think it's important too in life to remember like all the hard work you've done to get somewhere. And so I don't take it for granted, but we all have crappy days at work. So, sometimes it's good to remember like, man, this was my dream a long time ago.
Yeah.
And it's just as cool as I was hoping it would be.
Wow. I think it's really inspiring for our listeners to hear, because there's a large number of our listeners who aren't yet in the position they want to be. Yeah. And they're trying to figure out how it is they get there. We just finished interviewing Randy Rawls not long ago. And he said something during his interview that really resonated with me. He said something to the effect of, why not me? Why can't that be me doing that thing that I want to do? And both of you and Larry, and I'm sure Nigel too, are in those positions where you're doing the thing that you set out to do a long time ago. So how cool.
Yeah. It is.
Yep, very much.
Our editor, Rob Reno, is fantastic. And So don't be surprised when the Kenny G comes into the background when you're talking on that, Chris. Well, John and I have a lot of influence on that, and we'll put in a word and see what we can do.
I would
It'll be very
appreciate it.
soothing,
Yeah.
very soothing in the background.
When every second counts, trust Night Flight Concepts to keep you mission ready. With advanced night vision technology, FAA certified repair services, and expert training, we've got your six. Visit nightflightconcepts.com to learn more.
When I used to be an FTO, I would turn on. I like hip hop music and I like jazz music. So if the trainee was doing stuff that was, I basically, if the trainee saw that jazz came on the car radio, which is very odd, like, let's be honest, sheriff's deputies listen to like country music. I'm not like cut from the same cloth as all these other people. So like, if the jazz came on, it was usually because they were screwing up quite a bit. And so they'd like look at me and I'd be like, I'm just trying to calm myself down. So like when they would be doing that, I didn't even need to say anything. It'd be like, okay, jazz is on. And then it'd be like, you could see they're like, oh God.
Oh, that's so good.
So needless to say, I play a lot of jazz music around here, around Larry, because he's just not doing very well. So
I was going to say, it's perfect. Next time I think I'm going to get a complaint, I'll just be playing it on the speaker in here when I come back.
So this also reminds me of our interview with Manny and his musical choices that came out during that podcast.
We still kid Manny about that. Manny Dickerson,
Nice.
he spilled the beans that he was singing along to Boy George in the car with his kids, and needless to say, I have not let up on him a bit since then about Boy George.
And his wife Deb actually gave us photo evidence of him on the couch watching it.
He was sitting watching 80s MTV, and Boy George was on, and Deb, his wife, who was also a pilot in TFO and a guest on the Hangar Z, snapped a picture of him sitting there watching it and sent it to me. And I said, oh my gosh, that is priceless.
That is awesome.
So get ready for the Kenny G stuff.
No problem.
Nigel, we haven't forgotten about you out there in the sun. Nigel's, for the listeners, he's at a different location just for sound purposes, but he's got Henry 1 in the background, and Nigel's the pilot, and appropriately, he's on the right side, right by the pilot door. So Nigel, tell us about where you grew up, and how you ended up not only in the States, but with Henry 1.
Well, I grew up in a little town in New Zealand called Whakatane. Let's just wait. We'll just wait for the pits to go by.
Cue the pits. Cue the pits.
So I was.
How do you spell that for the listeners?
Whakatane, and it comes from the saying "Kia whakatane oia ho," which means "Let us act as men" in Maori.
Wow. Well, you told us that we're going to talk about your hometown and be ready, and we were, but I wasn't that ready. That's great.
Sounds like lyrics that come out of Compton.
Yeah. So in my childhood, I spent a lot of time skiing up the mountain at the local ski field that was called Whakapapa.
Good luck putting these subtitles in, guys.
We're gonna have to turn up the Kenny G really loud.
But in all seriousness, I was very mechanically minded as a kid, and I joined the military as an aircraft mechanic, the Air Force, and very, very quickly learned once I was enlisted that breaking them is a whole lot more fun than fixing them. And so I applied to become a pilot. And you have to be commissioned to be a pilot down under. So once I was selected, I went off to officer school and then on to wings course, which, because of the size of the New Zealand military, is pretty small. We started with 13 on my wings course, and there were 7 of us that graduated. So it typically has about a 50% washout rate, or it did back then. And it also involved a little bit of time in a small fighter jet as part of the training, and then graduated, and you either went fighter pilot, helicopter pilot, or transport pilot. And I really wanted to be a helicopter pilot, and I graduated high enough off my course to get what I wanted. And then, so I went from flying the jet on a Friday to flying a Bell 47 the following week and commencing my basic helicopter training. And I never looked back. I went on to the Huey and flew the Huey for a number of years. And because of the size of the New Zealand military, we only have one helicopter unit. And we did everything. So from battlefield support to the Army, search and rescue, special forces operations, day and night stuff, a little bit of firefighting here and there. Every day was different. And, between our unit, we flew anywhere between about 6,000 and 8,000 hours a year. So we were pretty busy. And then I went back to airplane flight instructor school and did my flight instructor's course, which is a 6-month-long course, really, really in-depth. And one of my check rides during that course, the formation flying check ride, was with the leader of our aerobatic team. And I guess I impressed him. And he asked if I wanted to spend a season in the aerobatic team, which was great, the Red Checkers. So flying up and down the country, doing air shows and, aerobatics down to 100 feet. And then I went back to the helicopter unit as a helicopter instructor and mostly did operational instruction. So teaching mountain flying techniques, search and rescue, the special ops stuff. So not much in bashing the traffic pattern, out in the real world doing some good stuff. Then my flying career was over because I reached a rank level that meant that I was going to be kind of destined for command positions. But I was lucky enough to score a job at the Pentagon for 3 years. So working for the New Zealand military, wow. But in the heart of DC. And that was a fantastic experience. And it was a really good way to transition to life in the US. 10 years earlier, I'd married an American that I'd met skiing in Washington State years before. So I made for an easy transition, and we moved to Oregon, where the company she worked for had an office. And again, that made the transition nice. And I got on with a company up there called Precision, which was absolutely fantastic. I ended up running their flight school side and introducing the Cabri to the US at the time. And at the same time, doing some operational stuff for them. And they gave me a lot of opportunity. And I took it and got into some utility stuff here and there. And then my wife got hijacked and took a job in the Bay Area. So we moved down here, and for a while I commuted back up to Oregon for work, and then found out about this Henry 1 job. And the more I dug into it, the more I was like, this is me all over. And applied for the position. It had been vacant for quite some time. And there's this fairly fresh-faced little bald guy there that watched me do my check ride. And, coming up on 6 years later, it's every bit of exciting and dynamic and the great team that I thought it would be. And I just haven't looked back.
I understand that. It is a great unit. It's always been a great team, and you're a great addition to it, Nigel. One of the things you did with Precision, and I should say that a couple of weeks ago, I was passing through Sonoma County, coming back from Big Sur, coming back with the RV, and my wife and I stopped for an hour at the Henry 1 hangar and got to chat a little bit, which was really nice. I hadn't been there in many years, and it was great to see the place look completely different, amazing improvements. And I got to see the helicopter, got to meet all of you. And but one of the things that we talked about, Nigel, was some of the flying you did at Precision. Talk about Christmas trees. That was fascinated me. Talk about Christmas tree harvesting in the helicopter.
So in Oregon, which has delightful winters where, it rains for about 120 days without stopping, the ground becomes pretty sodden in the Christmas tree farms, and you can't get vehicles out to pick up the trees. And so it's pretty common to use a helicopter to get the trees from the field to the yard, which is typically a hard packed gravel area, where they bale them and stack them. Sometimes they'll put them in refrigerated containers for shipping offshore. And it normally kicks off late October because of the time frame that they need to ship them overseas, and it runs right through to early December. Typically a 500 or a Jet Ranger, little helicopter, and we're slinging up to or around about 1,000 bundles of trees a day. So you start as soon as it's light enough to see, often in the rain and poor visibility, and we run 1 hour fuel cycles, so you can have a little bit of a break. The helicopter never shuts down. You land, gets another hour's worth of gas, and off you go again. You're just in the zone doing it. You're listening to music, and you're just back and forth, watching out for the power lines and keeping an eye on any wind that comes up so you don't get into vortex ring state. It's a pretty short line, so you're pretty close to the ground. But the key thing is the hook never stops moving. It's you have an angry farmer out there timing you if you're not flying fast enough.
Wow. That is amazing. When we chatted about it, got back in the RV, and my wife and I, Tracy and I, just chatted about that and said, that's amazing. It's something you don't think about. You see all these trees, they're all over the United States in these large areas, and you never think about how it got there. And one of the things that happens is there's some helicopter pilot yanking trees out of one place and moving them to another. And just for the record, so we're fair to everybody, what kind of music were you listening to when you were doing that, Nigel?
Not jazz, but a Chopin or Bach maybe.
See, I like that. That would actually be appropriate for that sort of thing. That's
then
good.
Some AC/DC.
Oh, of course. Well, of course, a little Thunderstruck will keep you motivated.
The funny thing is, and it took me a little while to figure this out, and it applies as much to this job here as it did slinging Christmas trees. I'm going to have to think about it, or else I'm going to screw it up. But the saying is, slow is smooth, and smooth is fast.
Yes,
that's right.
And so when you're slinging the line, whether you got guys on it or Christmas trees on it, slow and smooth is the fastest way of getting the job done.
Wow. It's interesting transition, isn't it? And we're going to talk more about that, obviously, coming up, because Henry 1 is, as our listeners are going to learn, is doing a lot of long line with humans at the end. So great background, Nigel. Fascinating. So let's get to the unit, and we'll start with you, Chris. Tell our listeners kind of a thumbnail history of Henry 1, and particularly that call sign. How did it end up being Henry 1, which is like both of you, Larry and Chris, both of us, you knew about Henry 1 as kids. That call sign is out there, not just in the region, but in the state, and a lot of people know about Henry 1, and I'm sure that there's people curious how you ended up with that call sign. So give us that overview, Chris, if you would.
Yeah. So Henry 1 was started initially. A deputy had a helicopter in the late 60s that he was using essentially as like a very primitive patrol helicopter, and then that turned into the office very end of the 60s, long before I was born, purchasing a Bell 47, flew that, then we transitioned to like the Hughes 500. And so the unfortunate thing was we had a couple fatal crashes in the late 70s and the early 80s and lost, and back then we called the aircraft, there was Angel 1 and Angel 2. And both those crews, we had several fatalities between those two crashes. So we eventually transitioned, to Bell products, but in the meantime, yes, that's where the Henry 1 name came from. I wish it was like a cooler story. People always ask us at demos and stuff like, "Oh, Henry, is that like named after someone?" Well, in the police phonetic alphabet, H is Henry, and we got one of them, so it's Henry 1. So unlike other agencies, we're not, there's been many Henry 1s We don't sequentially number them like other agencies do with their helicopters. It's just always Henry 1. So that's where the name comes from. So, but yeah, we're like Jack said, we're I think we're pretty well known in this region.
Absolutely.
For the stuff that we do, and so yeah,
very well known, and for good reason, which we're going to talk about. Talk about Chris, if you would give us the mission profiles and the crew makeup.
Let this guy pass real quick.
Which is really cool. We didn't even have to add. John usually has his soundboard there, and he can add noises. We don't need that today. That's a real thing.
And I'm sure with the Kenny G kind of playing melodically in the background,
really cool.
Lola, it's just going to be totally.
It really will be cool.
Our mission profiles, we're a law enforcement helicopter first and foremost. That's like 75% of our call volume is law enforcement, which has kind of been a change over the years. This used to be a very rescue kind of centric program. We still do a ton of rescues, and that's, I think that's why we have a helicopter here. But the majority of what we do is actually law enforcement. Rescue and search and rescue, that makes up the other kind of big part of what we do. But we also have the ability, firefighting. We do have a 150-gallon Bambi bucket that we do firefighting with. We'll talk a little bit more about firefighting, I'm sure, with this region, because we do get hit pretty hard with fires, and then we do medevac. So we do patient transports to, the local area hospitals. We have a trauma center right here in Santa Rosa, but even, outside the area, guess that's what you get for being at the airport. So
it's great. I love it.
Yeah. So between all those different disciplines, and with one aircraft, it keeps us really, really busy, combined with, the Bay Area as a whole, doesn't have a lot of, in general, especially compared to Southern California, we don't have a lot of aircraft here. Yes, some of our, we're one of the 9 Bay Area counties. And so we do have obviously an aircraft, but not every county in the Bay Area has an aircraft. And even the counties that do likely only have 1 or 2, supplemented by the Highway Patrol with a base in Napa, again, with only 2 helicopters, 1 up at any given time. So, between all the different agencies, and then you kind of narrow it down to who's doing rescue, which is even kind of a smaller pool. It's like, it just keeps us, between our county, the rest of the, the North Bay, the northern region of the state, because of some of the unique stuff that we do with the long line, the program just stays really, really busy.
What's the crew makeup on a typical day?
Thanks to our sponsor, Dallas Avionics, who provides innovative products to law enforcement, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, military, air medical, search and rescue, and special missions operations. Dallas Avionics distributes OEM equipment, including communications equipment, digital audio systems, PA systems, flight tracking, and other mission-critical devices. Visit DallasAvionics.com for more details.
So it depends. And I say it depends. Obviously, we always have a pilot. There's always a TFO on board. We do carry sheriff paramedics. Kind of a unique part of our program is that our paramedics are not full-time on the unit. They are part-time. So most of them, because we just hired a paramedic within the last 6 months. It's actually, she's an air ambulance nurse, but was able to get accredited in this county for paramedicine. And so, but for the most part, they're full-time firefighters from a variety of Bay Area agencies, and then they work part-time on the helicopter. So we've got actually nine paramedics in total, which you'd kind of think, okay, well, so you always are carrying a paramedic, you're always ALS. Unfortunately, with their schedules and it not being a full-time part of our unit, we carry a paramedic, I would say about half the time, half to 3/4. It's not an ideal way to do things, but at the same time, it's better to be ALS than not. The flip side is that all of our TFOs are EMTs. So we're always at a basic life support level, so a BLS level. But then it's, obviously an enhancement when we're ALS. Kind of the interesting part is that when we are, and we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, like long line it requires 2 people. It requires a guy on the bottom of the line. We don't do any self-rescues here, so there's always either a medic or a TFO on the line, and then a pilot to obviously fly the aircraft. We don't need a spotter, a hoist operator. So essentially evolutions for a rescue is really no different if it's a TFO and pilot versus if you have the paramedic on board. It's just that potential difference in patient care that we can provide on the end of the line. And then obviously subsequently, if you're doing transports. So it's a little dynamic how we work here. It's not, I mean, yeah, in all honesty, it'd be great if we were ALS 100% of the time with a paramedic, but we make do with what we have. So
yeah, very interesting.
When you go on a proactive patrol flight and you've got a medic with you that day, is it turned into a 3-crewed patrol flight?
It does. It does in the sense of, from a flight safety standpoint, they're a very active member of the crew. From a searching standpoint, obviously we've got a monitor in the back of our aircraft that they're, I hate to say this, but I had a really good find one night that I never would have found unless it was a paramedic in the back being like, "Hey, dummy, there's your hot spot right there." But it was a great spot. I mean, it turned out great. But yeah, so we become an active crew. I would say on the flip side, we operate really well as a crew of 2 as well. Sometimes when you add that third person, it does take maybe a little bit of adjustment. I feel that our ALS, so I'll keep referring to it as ALS coverage. So our paramedic coverage has gotten better over the years. And so but again, when you're basically, at any given time, there's 3 different people operating together. They don't always operate together. There is that little bit of like, okay, just remembering like, how does this guy work versus that guy? But I mean, that's just the kind of the byproduct of any crewed environment. So.
Yeah, I think the crew resource management part of that becomes critical. When you look at how agencies in Europe, for example, operate, a lot of those agencies are using 3 people as part of the crew. Essentially you have a MISH commander and a TF on the back, and really like that model. When you have the ability to put 3 people on a mission, and the pilot can pilot, and then you have the 2 TFOs doing different things. I think it's really effective. So I think it's interesting to hear you guys talk about that and some of the benefits that come with that, like having your paramedic in the back finding a suspect for you on the monitor. That's great.
Well, and to your point, CRM is really important at this agency, and we really strive on it when, that we try to have a really, robust safety culture here. And so I think that there are even times where I have no problem, especially as the supervisor, if there's the ability, if we aren't ALS and we don't have a paramedic, I'm also okay if it's a busy summer day having 2 TFOs on board, because at some points, a crew, operating with a crew of 3, especially in the when we go to like the rescue environment and how dynamic that can become, it's when you have that extra set of hands. I don't really care if you're a paramedic, an EMT, it doesn't really make any difference. I just need another professional there to help at the end of the line. So yeah, no, CRM is super important here.
I can tell you that I'm going to give my own firsthand experience sitting in the back of Henry 1 the first time. This is a long time ago. This is several unit supervisors ago. Heck, we talked about it the other day. This unit supervisor is now a professional drummer. I mean, Eric Thompson was the sergeant. He's now with Dry Creek Station. He plays with a band up in your area. I follow him on social media to this day. But Eric was up front as a TFO, and he's piloting, and there was a paramedic in the back. And I will never, ever forget that flight of how involved the paramedic was in identifying traffic, clearing tails. Yeah, you're clear on my side. I mean, it was like, wow, this is a paramedic that is truly, truly part of this crew. And it impressed me the first flight. And it sounds, and I know it continued.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, man, we were training, training a new TFO last night, and, a big, something we are striving. And, a pilot told me when I was new here, at some point, you are no longer a passenger. You are a crew member. I get that you're not flying the aircraft, but last night we were training some off-field, landing stuff, and we're landing in LZs, and we landed on top of a dam in one of our state parks here, where you've got about 2 feet on either side of the skid because of the guardrails running down it. And it's like, we typically do that evolution with new paramedics and TFOs, because truly without the TFO popping that left door, without the medic on the back popping that right door, it's almost impossible to land on that dam, because there's no way to really guarantee the clearance you're going to have. And sure enough, last night, it required on that left side being like, no, stop. We need to roll right, 2 feet, 1 feet, stop, so it's that, to your point, it's like, we're doing stuff that's so dynamic that you need, all, and again, great if you have 3, but at the minimum, you've got to have that CRM between, your guys for sure.
Fantastic. Nigel, let's switch to you and talk about that airframe that's sitting over your shoulder and why that airframe works so well in the Henry 1 situation.
Well, certainly for long lining, the narrow body on the bells is great. You can get your head well out the door and unobstructed view of the line. No pesky window to look through or fog up. So that part of it is great. The other aspect that really suits us is that we don't have in-house maintenance here. So we have a contract maintenance provider, and we have a mechanic that lives a couple of hours away. In fact, he's driving here right now. So we pretty much go 50 hours between maintenance evolutions, which is great. So pilots take care of it in the meantime, and unless we have an unscheduled breakage, we go that 50 flight hours in between progressive inspections. So as far as the aircraft goes, I had no 407 time before I came here, and I grew to love it pretty quickly. And the night of the Kincaid fire with Chris as my TFO and Gabe Sternis was the medic in the back, where we had about 80 knot winds and up and down drafts in excess of 2,000 feet per minute. Trying to get in front of that fire to clear some houses out of the way. It was the middle of the night, and it was some of the roughest conditions that I've ever been in. And Chris turned to me at one point and said, "If you tell me we have to go back, I'm good with that." And I said, well, how about if I tell you if I'm getting to the aircraft limit or my limit? Because right now I'm at about 80% of both. And he goes, sounds like a plan. And I was really amazed at how the aircraft handled it that night. It was testament to its design.
Fantastic.
So very happy with it.
And give us the specifics of that particular 407. How old is it? I know that 407 has some additional model numbers at the end of it. What is that particular aircraft?
Yeah, so it's a 2018 GXP. So the P on the end is a little bit more horsepower than the initial 407s. They're only making GXIs now. So the difference between this one and the new ones is this just has single channel FADEC. So if the FADEC fails, it reverts to manual mode, and you've got to fly it old school. So back to the Bell 47 days.
Yeah,
and and the new ones with dual channel FADEC is the throttle isn't actually connected via mechanical linkage to the fuel control unit or the HMU. It's complete electronic redundancy.
Got it.
So that might be something that we look towards in the future. But it's a really great aircraft. It has a really great tail rotor on it. I never have to worry about lack of tail rotor authority. Particularly long lining. In those high power situations with a bunch of folks on the bottom of the line, so heavier weights, and so that's reassuring. And with all the extra stuff we've got bolted to this thing and all the rescue equipment inside, off the cart. Most days, if we're a crew of 3, we're typically within a couple of 100 pounds of max gross. And if I, in the summertime, I run a slightly less fuel load in it, so that if we respond to a fire that's nearby, I'm light enough to get the bucket out of the pond without having to shed too much gear.
Nice. Well, that's it's a great platform, and it's not the first 407 that's been in the unit. Do you know, Nigel, before you got there, was it a couple 407s or one? Do you remember, or do you know?
It was leased one, and then we owned one. And then what's funny is the company that provides our maintenance, RSI, bought our old helicopter, and it passes through here now and again on contract, and it's still painted the same. And we're like, oh, look, it's the old Henry one.
Well, it's a beautiful paint, so no wonder they kept it the same. It's really nice. Really, really nice.
I hadn't got a chance to fly a 407, but everybody that I've spoken to that has flown a 407 in the law enforcement capacity has talked about its nimble capability. Talk about flying a vehicle pursuit, and how responsive that aircraft is. Can you talk about that a little bit in your experience with that aircraft in those pursuits?
Yeah, so we fly our pursuits with the quality of the camera that we've got. We're typically up around 1,000 feet and doing bigger orbits, so it doesn't need to be too agile. I can talk about a pursuit that we had earlier this year with Larry, and it was multiple vehicles all in pursuit at the same time. They just robbed a marijuana dispensary, and it was kind of carnage with cops everywhere chasing cars in all directions. However, the marine layer was in, so the cloud base was only 200 feet. And I said to Larry, I can go under it, but it's going to make it tough on you. And he said, I'm fine with that. And so we may have been blowing garden furniture over in people's backyards, but
allegedly.
So it very, very nimble. With the precision long lining, the response to the rotor system is really important, particularly if we're long lining to vessels. To have that instant response and reaction from the aircraft is vital, and this thing does a really great job of it.
Talking about the vessel work, there's not many agencies that I know of that have the capability or the proficiency to do such a thing. I think LA County is one of the few outside of the U.S. Coast Guard in California that I know of. Can you talk about what that training looks like and how you guys stay proficient in that mission set?
It's a very perishable skill. And one of my biggest fears when I turn up for my shift, which is a week about, is that in the first hour of my first day back after a week of not flying, is that we get some gnarly, really technical rescue. Because when you put the line on and you've got a rescuer on the bottom of it and you're going to pull someone out of a precarious situation, you don't get to warm up. The first pick is the most vital pick. And you can't be knocking someone off a cliff face or putting the guys down on a slopey ledge that they fall off or roll an ankle or something. So you just have to turn it on. And for that reason, we train almost every day with the line. And the guys that are riding the line and the pilots that are flying the line would just get so much repetition. And we don't train for very long each time we do it, but it's the repetition and the varied lengths of line and the very various locations of training that we do to just keep those skills up. So we were in the ocean yesterday doing some ocean rescues, and I have no doubt that later on today somewhere we'll probably be on a cliff face somewhere. And it's only 10 or 15 minutes at a time. We have a currency program both for the pilots and the rescuers, whereby they have to get on the line every so many days. They have to get their hands on the equipment every so many days. So if we haven't had a rescue or we're unable to train, they'll get the dummy in the hangar and get their rescue equipment out and just practice going through it. Because when you're under the rotor wash in the forest and trying to put someone in a device, it's not the time to kind of be trying to remember which buckle goes where and how it works.
Right.
And it's the same for the line. We've made some significant changes in recent years to the configuration of our line, namely the collection plate on the bottom of the line, which makes it plug and play. When I first turned up here, we were making our own lines and tying knots in them. So to go to prefabricated lines now, it's all just plug and play. So if we go down to Marin, where the trees can be 220 feet tall and we need more than 200 feet of line, is we fold the 100 in half and we connect it on the bottom of the 200, and in 20 seconds, you've now got a 250 foot line. Where in the old days, we couldn't do that. In fact, we used to make the lines from straight ropes.
Kind of to expand on Nigel's point with like the training and for a long time here, like any agency, it's like you get to a point where you go, okay, we train a lot, but like that training needs to, in my vision was that training needs to be documented better than it had been. And so, it was like, trying to, like anything, it's like everybody does things a little bit different. So we're looking at like flight log programs, but we also want to document our training a certain way because the way we were doing it was just not efficient. It really was. It was just obviously not meeting our needs the way we were doing it. And so, reaching out to like other agencies, but again, we kind of do things pretty unique here. So, we worked with the county of Sonoma actually has programmers. And so we built this program where not only is it a flight log program, but it's also a currency tracking, a training tracking. Essentially, I can pull up a spreadsheet instantly that shows me exactly what everybody's at currency-wise. It turns yellow when I'm 10 days out, or when somebody's 10 days out from needing to be current in that thing. It goes red if they're not. We have a protocol for if they are red, how those rescues are done. But long story short, it's like I feel like we're at a point now where it's like, yes, we're doing a ton of training, but that training's also being documented in a way that's like, yeah, it's one thing, great, we go out and train, but like we talked about, a big chunk of our unit is part-time. And so you need to keep those people on that same currency program. And so that has been a big also value added for us, is that like, no, we are all on the same sheet of music. And so there's not just, nothing gets slipped through the cracks here when it comes to training. And
did you and your IT people create that program, or that to be unique for you?
Yeah, it took about 2 years from the concept that Nigel and I basically came up with.
Nice.
And then working with, we call them ISD. So working with ISD, again, getting county government. So we actually have to pay for our own programmers to make this, but getting our budget analyst on board and the office with like, absolutely, we can devote tens of thousands of dollars to this program. And so again, it's kind of like, I'll beat a dead horse, but like, it's nice to see like continued commitment from the county, because it's like, we come with needs and they recognize like, okay, well, we don't know that, I hate to say it, but like I'm sure with most agencies, like, yeah, this helicopter looks cool when it flies, but there's actually a ton of stuff on the back end that makes it safe. And so that stuff we do does look cool, but there's got to be stuff behind the scenes that makes it safe. So
exactly,
I appreciate that.
You brought up something that I want to talk about, because we haven't talked about it, at least that I remember, on the podcast ever, and it's training documentation, the importance of doing that. So we all know that if you go out and train, that's great. But from a legal standpoint, and unfortunately, we have to consider that a lot of times, if you don't document what you did, it never happened. If you find yourself deposed in front of a courthouse and you're trying to explain why you did something the way you did, you say, well, that's how I was trained. Well, then they're going to be like, okay, well, where's the documentation supporting that? In my unit, we really took a page out of SWAT's book the last 5 years of my time there, and put together not just a training outline, like this is what we're going to do, but whoever is running training would put, what the goal of the training was, how those goals were met, what deficiencies were found, what remediations are going to be put in place. And there's a whole course of documentation that went into these training documentations. So can you talk about that and how you guys are doing that and some of the benefits you've found from that?
Bell is proud to sponsor Vertical Helicasts and their vision to hold meaningful mission, safety, and best practice conversations in the helicopter industry. The lessons learned from these conversations will undoubtedly shape the future of both new and veteran helicopter operators.
Well, I'm going to give a ton of credit to Nigel. So, Nigel came, as he was describing, from a flight school background, and obviously a military background, but then a flight school background. So him coming here, we had a training syllabus for new deputies, new pilots, but I'll be honest, it was antiquated. I hate to say it, half the stuff in there just didn't even really apply to what we did anymore. And so it was essentially like rewriting the training syllabus from scratch. So we have now, and grant you there's overlap, but we have 3 different initial training syllabuses for a pilot, for a TFO, for a medic. And so yes, some of them are totally overlapping, but then others obviously are totally different. So that took a lot. I mean, we're talking years to develop this stuff, but so we have that for the initial training. And then like we've talked about the ongoing training, it is important that, to your point, and this was a problem I had with kind of how we were, I hate to even use the word tracking training, but at one point here, we had a whiteboard with a day, and you would put the date of the last time you did something. Well, whiteboards are really dumb in the sense of they don't tell you when things are coming up. It's easy. So my joke was to a supervisor at the time was, So do we go into the deposition with the NTSB and I bring my whiteboard in and go, well, see, we did all this cool stuff, but don't mind. So I hate to say it, it was kind of that like, and I'm not afraid of doing work. So it's like, I'll be the first to like make this work, and it's going to take a long time. And like kind of I was explaining is like, there was definitely trial and error of as you're doing this program, and it takes all of us. It took Larry to go, we eventually rolled this flight log out about 1.5 years ago, but then it's actually using it to go, oh shoot, that doesn't work at all, or oh, we need to add this whole other part to it, but it's working as a team, and that's what I love about this unit is that people up here are truly a team, and so when we need to get something done, we work together to get it done, and that's kind of the beauty of having a smaller team up here.
And I'll just follow up on that. One of the biggest challenges, and I'm sure you'll agree with me when I say this, is determining or defining the difference between competency and currency.
Yes.
Okay. Now you can have someone that has all their currencies and goes through evolutions of the training manual every single day, and they're still incompetent. So how do you separate that out? So we had a safety.
He wasn't pointing at anyone when he said that.
I made it.
So yeah, I guess I'm going to have to update that training manual. So someone slipped through the cracks. But so during the course of initial training, whether you're a pilot, a TFO, or a paramedic here, it's very, very clear there are objectives to meet. And at the end of your training, you do essentially a check ride and you get signed off as being competent. Then the currency program kicks in, and you stay current, by meeting our currency program along the way. However, it's very clear in our policy that at any point in time, if someone has a little bit of a mishap, and that's reported through our safety occurrence reporting system, or is just viewed to kind of be slipped below the required standards, we have no problems addressing those, whether it's a course of remedial training or just revisiting something, getting them back up to the level of competency that we need, or we'll let them go. There is no room on this unit for someone that is not meeting the required standard.
Yeah, high stakes. There's very little room for error.
Larry, we're coming back to you, Larry. But before we get into the mission equipment, do you have anything you want to talk about on this topic? Obviously, you were involved in this program and the currency and competency as well. And you can defend yourself as well, Larry, if you'd like.
Yeah.
But anything you want to add to that before we get into the mission equipment?
Yeah, John, it's kind of funny you talk about that. You took a book out of SWAT. Chris is gonna laugh at me for this, but I'm lucky. I am still a member of our SWAT team. Normally, when you get up here, they don't let you do both. So hopefully, none of our admin listens to this, because I think they've forgotten about me being on both. But because obviously we're on call for both units. So when I'd gotten up here, when we do our unit training. So we used to do monthly unit training where it involves all the paramedics, all the TFOs, all the pilots. And, we were just documenting it on kind of a form. So I realized, I was like, man, we have a cool, PDF set up with SWAT that we document a lot of our training on. So I kind of brought that to the unit to update that as well. So
nice.
But yeah, as far as the training goes, we're very lucky. We get to train again, being the full-time TFO up here, I train every single day. I'm at the bottom of the long line, at least every other day. And every time a paramedic comes up, or some of our part-time flight officers, we got to get them checked off and get them current. So, I get to do a lot of training. And honestly, it helps us be successful when we have the big incidents or, the events that, we got to be on point. So, it's very, our training program is very robust. We are, with Chris and Nigel, basically helping create that new flight log system. It's been great. I can go in there, look, and be like, okay, cool. This is what we need to do today. This paramedic hasn't been in 2 months, so we're going to go long line. We're going to, work on a couple rescue devices. So we kind of have a plan for the day.
You bring up a couple things that I want to touch on. One, I like that you brought some outside expertise in from SWAT. Anytime I think we can lean on our experiences and other parts of our career and bring them to make what we're doing currently better. That's great. So I love that you did that. But I remember as Nigel's describing your guys' long lining experience, you talking about your fear of heights. So I wondered as he's talking about that, how that first evolution went with you at the bottom of that long line.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was lucky enough to actually do it with SWAT. Every year that we had a big air show here at the Sonoma County Airport, and part of that there's a Henry 1 demo and then a Henry 1 SWAT combined demo. So, I had the luxury of getting on the line as a SWAT team member. I am scared of heights. I think I've kind of gotten over it a little bit, but now I like to joke that I'm scared of ladders. I think I'm scared of ladders more than I am of heights. So there's no way I could ever be a firefighter.
Me too. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, that first experience, it's exhilarating, and it's definitely weird when you're hanging 100 feet below that helicopter. But I think what's even worse is our 200-foot long line. You're so far below the helicopter that you and I can have a conversation on the bottom of the line like we're having right now, because it's so high up there and you can barely even hear it. So it kind of feels like you're just flying.
Before we move on, sorry, Jack, to hijack the conversation, but with your experience at LAPD when it comes to training and the documentation of ongoing training, because I do think I agree with Larry and Nigel and Chris, there's a distinction between initial training, recurrency training, and ongoing training. With the ongoing training, even and recurrency, did you guys have a way of documenting that was effective at LAPD?
Yes, but it got better. It evolved and it got better over the years. And I've been gone 8 years now, and I know it is at a really good place now. And that's for a lot of reasons and a lot of different people that are there now. Big ones being Chief TFO, Chief Pilot, really changed some of that for the better. But there's always been that documentation for whether it was shooting from the helicopter or check rides or TFO training. TFO training, oh my gosh, that's a full-time job at the Los Angeles Police Department. I mean, there's a trainee in a helicopter probably constantly. I mean, it's probably 12 months out of the year now. And that's always been like that because it's a big unit. There's big turnover. There's retirements. There's promotions. And so you had to have good documentation, especially when the washout rate was so high. You had to be able to defend that. And if you didn't have good documentation and to show the competency part of what we've been talking about, you would lose every case. But so that's always been good, but I think it's better now than ever.
That's great.
And it's important for the reasons we're all talking about.
I think we, as an agency, used to primarily document everything from a standpoint of what you're saying, from more of a human resources standpoint, to make sure we could defend somebody being released from the program. But I think as we evolved, we grew into more of not just that, but also from a legal system standpoint. How do we go into a courthouse and protect and talk about what we're doing that makes sense with times and dates and specific courses of action and stuff. So I encourage folks, if you don't have that as part of your agency's training protocols now, that you look at a way to do that, because unfortunately, again, being in a legalistic society, you may find yourself in a position where you're having to answer in front of a jury and a judge why you do a certain thing a certain way.
Yeah. It's part of risk management. You have to think, okay, what if something goes wrong? The first questions, what are the first questions going to be by the sheriff, by the chief, by the FAA, by the NTSB? What are those questions going to be? Are we prepared to answer those and show documentation for those questions? If the answer is, I think so, you're not doing it right. You're not, because everybody is going to have something happen that isn't perfect. It might be an incident, it might be an accident, it might be fatal, it might not be fatal. It doesn't matter. If whatever happens, you've got to be able to document and show, hey, listen, accidents truly do happen, even if you are competent and current. So we better be able to prove it. And that's what I loved hearing about the system that you've set up. It just makes sense. And it's especially for an operation like Henry 1, which again, we're going to get deeper into here in a second. And it's very unique. And there's some high risk if it's not done correctly. And if you're not current, just all the rope stuff and the connectors, like Nigel mentioned, the connectors, and there's a lot to know, and there's multiple people involved in it. So I'm glad this conversation went down that competency and currency line. And Chris, you're liable to get a whole bunch of calls at some point, from people saying, wow, I better call that Sergeant Haas and see how they did that, because, we need to do that. And that's good.
And we're an open book here. So, I look at, I'm a big proponent as the rest of my team is, like, knowledge is not power. I want to make sure that, like, I've learned lots of things from other units, from other experiences. And so vice versa. It's like, I don't think we do everything perfect here, but I'll tell you how we do it. And that's how and I hate to say it, it's the interfacing with other agencies that make you better. So yeah, I may have something that helps your unit out. And, we've been fortunate around here with some newer air units that started, out, in different parts of the state, that they have sent guys here to kind of see and shadow what we do.
Yeah. I can think of some of them. One that pops into my mind is Stanislaus County. Am I correct?
You're 100% correct. We've had Stanislaus, El Dorado, Tehama's starting a program. So, these other agencies, and, the first thing I'll tell you when you come here from another agency, or if I talk to you on the phone, is like, good that you talk to me, but you're going to want to talk to me, and you're going to want to talk to my buddy at CHP, and you're going to want, like,
yes, we
all kind of do different variations of the same thing. And so I hate to say, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but, like, our relationship with the Highway Patrol, they're the next county over with their base. And so it's the working together, and it makes us better. And so, yeah, we're open book here. So people listen to this and want to kind of, like, pull the layer back a little bit more, I'll show you what we do. I have no problem with that. It's just, and that helps me learn too. And lets our guys kind of have exposure to other units as well, which is super important.
Well, I know firsthand from Stanislaus County, because I'm very familiar with them and their operation, and their retired sheriff and I are very close friends. And so I know a lot about their operation, and they are thrilled with the cooperation and the training they've gotten from Henry 1 over the years. And they're doing things now that they never dreamt they would do, except that they went to a very professional unit that was doing it for years and got trained. And they were thrilled that you guys were willing to do that and that you did it. And they're better off for it. I'll tell you that, no doubt.
Well, and they fly a 407 now, so obviously they're just there. But no, to your point, exactly. And very close with that agency, obviously, and I don't know, they're doing things right there. It's very, it's cool to watch the stuff that they're doing, because, like you said, they've kind of taken what they've learned from us, and now they're doing it themselves, and that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. All right, Larry, back to you. Now we're going to hit your mission equipment, but let's get something straight. What music do you want in the background while you're talking about this?
Any country would work fine.
Country. Okay.
Typical deputy.
Taylor Swift.
Straight. Taylor Swift. I didn't know Larry was a Swiftie. All right.
He drives an electric truck, so that should make sense that would be the kind of music you would likely listen to. So,
well, I do live in California, so gas is expensive.
Okay. All right, Larry. Fair enough. All right, Larry, take us through the TFO side of the cockpit. Talk about what mission equipment do you have on that bird, what light, radios, mapping system, all of it. And tell us about that.
So I'll start with the camera. We run the L3 MX10 camera, and then that's partnered with the shot over mapping system, which we went to about a year ago, which has just been a game changer for us. Yeah. Radios, we run the Technosonic TDFM 9300, which our radio shop used to do a lot of the programming. I got to give a shout out to a guy in one of our neighboring counties, Contra Costa, John. He helped us with some of the programming, which then in turn turned into Chris sending me to the Technosonic operator class. So now I can do all our programming.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Which has been very nice. Little nuances, different scan setups. If something we don't like, or, we want to change kind of the way our radios are set up, I just plug the computer in and make those changes real time. So that's been kind of a nice setup.
Can you briefly talk about that operator's course? How long was it? What did you, obviously we know what you got out of it as far as being able to change the scan banks and stuff, but a lot of agencies I think would benefit from that. I know we would. Well, how did you get that class, and what was the class like? Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers. When every second counts, trust Night Flight Concepts to keep you mission ready. With advanced night vision technology, FAA-certified repair services, and expert training, we've got your six. Visit nightflightconcepts.com to learn more.
Thanks to our sponsor, Dallas Avionics, who provides innovative products to law enforcement, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, military, air medical, search and rescue, and special missions operations. Dallas Avionics distributes OEM equipment, including communications equipment, digital audio systems, PA systems, flight tracking, and other mission-critical devices. Visit DallasAvionics.com for more details.
Bell is proud to sponsor Vertical Helicasts and their vision to hold meaningful mission, safety, and best practice conversations in the helicopter industry. The lessons learned from these conversations will undoubtedly shape the future of both new and veteran helicopter operators.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicast and in partnership with Vertical Valor magazine. In this two-part series, we had the privilege of speaking with the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department, also known as Henry 1, including Unit Supervisor Chris Haas, Pilot Nigel Cooper, and TFO Lawrence Matelli. This conversation provided a deep dive into the impactful work of Henry 1, showcasing their mission profiles and the critical importance of training and teamwork in public safety aviation. We explored the collaborative efforts with other law enforcement agencies, emphasizing the essential dynamics that make their operations successful. As they shared personal stories from significant events, like the Tubbs fire, we gained valuable insight into the challenges faced by these dedicated professionals and the camaraderie that motivates them to serve the community in times of crisis. For more information, be sure to check out the accompanying article by Vertical Valor magazine, available now at verticalmag.com. We hope this episode's given you a greater appreciation for the hard work and commitment of law enforcement air support units like Henry 1. Thank you for listening, and be sure to join us next time for more inspiring conversations here on the Hangar Z Podcast.